They told us it was just a routine patrol. Check the perimeter, secure the area, return by nightfall. But when the ground beneath our Humvee collapsed and we fell into a chamber that hadn't seen daylight in over 3,000 years, we realized some secrets were never meant to be found. What we discovered down there changed everything I thought I knew about history, about war, and about why we were really there. This is my story, and I've kept silent for 34 years, until now.
My name is Marcus Reed, and in 1991 I was a 23-year-old sergeant in the United States Army, stationed in the middle of nowhere, somewhere between the Kuwait border and the Iraqi desert. The war was winding down, or at least that's what they told us. Saddam's forces were retreating, oil fires painted the sky black, and we were part of the cleanup crew, making sure the roads were clear and the area was secure. I remember the heat most of all. It wasn't just hot, it was the kind of heat that made you feel like you were being cooked from the inside out. Even at dawn, when we'd start our patrols, the temperature was already climbing past 90 degrees. By noon, it would hit 120, sometimes higher. The sand got everywhere, in your boots, your food, your eyes. You'd think you'd get used to it, but you never did. My unit was small, just 7 of us. There was Lieutenant Davidson, a by-the-book officer from Virginia who always looked like you'd rather be anywhere else. Then there was Corporal Jimmy Santos, my best friend since basic training, always cracking jokes even when things got tense. We had Private Chen, the quiet tech guy who could fix anything with duct tape and wire. Rodriguez was our medic, a father of 3 who carried photos of his kids everywhere. Jackson and Pettis were the muscle, both built like tanks and twice as tough. And then there was me, trying to keep everyone alive and sane. February 26th started like any other day. We gathered at 0500 hours for briefing. Davidson stood in front of a crinkled map, pointing to a sector about 40 clicks northwest of our base camp. "Gentlemen, today's mission is simple," he said, though his eyes suggested otherwise. "Intelligence reports some unusual activity in this quadrant. Could be stragglers from retreating Iraqi units, could be nothing. We're going to patrol the area, document anything suspicious, and report back. Standard reconnaissance. Questions?" Santos raised his hand. "Define unusual activity, sir." Davidson hesitated. "Local reports of lights, movement at night. Probably just nomads or scavengers, but command wants eyes on it." Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle. In my 2 years of service, I'd learned to trust my gut, and right then, my gut was telling me this wasn't going to be a standard patrol. We loaded into 2 Humvees just after sunrise. The convoy route took us through what used to be farmland before the war, now just scorched earth and abandoned vehicles. The landscape was apocalyptic. Burnout tanks, scattered ammunition, the skeletal remains of buildings that had been bombed into oblivion. Chen was monitoring the radio, but it was mostly static. Communication out here was spotty at best. "Anyone else think this feels wrong?" Rodriguez muttered from the back seat. "Everything about this place feels wrong. Been feeling wrong since we got here." He wasn't wrong. There was something oppressive about the desert. Not just the heat, but something else. An emptiness that felt almost alive. The locals had stories about this region, tales passed down for generations. They said the desert kept secrets, that there were places where the old world still lingered, waiting. I dismissed it as superstition. Soldiers tell stories to pass the time, and local legends are just that, legends. But as we drove deeper into that unmarked sector, the GPS started glitching. The compass in my hand spun lazily, unable to find true north. Chen tapped his equipment, frowning. "Sir, we're experiencing some kind of interference. Can you fix it?" "Not sure what's causing it, sir. Could be electromagnetic disturbance from something." We continued on, navigating by landmarks and instinct. The terrain changed gradually. Fewer rocks, deeper sand, and strange formations that looked almost geometric, like ancient foundations buried beneath centuries of dust. That's when Santos pointed ahead. "Hey Sarge, you seeing this?" In the distance, barely visible through the heat shimmer, were stone pillars jutting from the sand. They were massive, weathered smooth by time and wind, but definitely man-made. Davidson ordered us to stop. We dismounted, weapons ready, and approached on foot. That's when everything changed. The pillars were unlike anything I'd seen before. They weren't Roman, weren't Greek. They were something older, carved with symbols that seemed to shift in the harsh sunlight. Each pillar stood about 15 feet tall, made of a dark stone that shouldn't have existed in this region. Granite, maybe, or something similar, but the nearest quarry for stone like this was hundreds of miles away. "What the hell is this?" Santos whispered, running his hand along the ancient surface. "Don't touch anything," Davidson ordered, but his voice lacked its usual authority. He was just as shaken as the rest of us. Chen pulled out his camera, documenting everything. "Sir, this isn't on any map. There's no archaeological record of structures in this area. This should have been documented, studied." "Maybe it was," Rodriguez said quietly. "Maybe that's why we're really here." I didn't want to believe him, but the thought had crossed my mind too. The convenient GPS failure, the vague briefing, the way Davidson had hesitated when describing our mission, it all suddenly felt orchestrated. We spread out, examining the site. There were 12 pillars in total, arranged in a perfect circle about 100 feet in diameter. In the center of the circle, the sand looked different, darker, more compact, as if something lay beneath. "Sarge, you need to see this," Jackson called out. I jogged over to where he stood at the edge of the circle. He was pointing down at what looked like steps, stone steps descending into the sand, partially buried but clearly intentional. "There's something under here," he said. "Something big." Davidson came over, studied the steps, then pulled out his radio. "Base, this is Charlie 7. We've discovered what appears to be an archaeological site. Requesting instructions. Over." Static. He tried again. Nothing but white noise. "Chen, what's going on with communications?" Chen was already checking his equipment, his face growing pale. "Sir, all frequencies are dead. Not jammed, just silent, like there's nothing out there at all." A chill ran down my spine despite the oppressive heat. We were cut off, standing in the middle of nowhere, at a site that officially didn't exist. "We need to report this," Davidson said, but he sounded uncertain. "We should head back, get proper equipment." That's when it happened. The ground trembled, just a slight vibration at first, like a distant explosion, but it grew stronger, more rhythmic. Sand began sliding away from the center of the circle, revealing more of those stone steps. "Everyone back!" I shouted. "Move away from the center!" We retreated toward the Humvees, but the trembling intensified. The sand was collapsing inward, creating a vortex that pulled everything toward the center. Our vehicles started sliding. "The Humvees!" Pettis yelled. Jackson and I ran toward the nearest vehicle, trying to secure it, but the sand beneath our feet was moving like water. I grabbed the door handle just as the ground beneath the Humvee gave way completely. There was a deafening crack, the sound of ancient stone finally surrendering to pressure. The earth opened up like a mouth, and the Humvee dropped into the darkness below. I was still holding the door handle. I fell. The drop felt endless, though it probably lasted only seconds. I hit water, cold, shocking water in the middle of the desert, and went under. Panic seized me as I struggled to find the surface, my gear weighing me down. My lungs burned. Then hands grabbed me, pulling me up. I broke the surface, gasping, and found Santos there, treading water beside me. "I got you, brother. I got you," he panted. We were in some kind of underground chamber. Light filtered down from the opening above, maybe 30 feet up, illuminating an impossible scene. We were floating in a subterranean pool, surrounded by walls covered with intricate carvings. Columns rose from the water like ancient sentinels, and beyond them I could see passages leading deeper into the darkness. One by one the others fell through. Davidson came down cursing, followed by Rodriguez, who had the medical pack strapped to his back. Chen managed to grab some equipment before the fall. Jackson and Pettis came last, both hitting the water hard, but surfacing quickly. "Everyone okay?" I called out, taking a mental count. 7 of us went in, 7 came out. Thank God. "Define okay," Santos coughed, spitting out water. "Because I'm pretty far from okay, Sarge." We swam toward the edge of the pool, pulling ourselves onto a stone platform. The Humvee had landed on its side in the shallow end, totaled but not completely submerged. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, the full scope of where we were became clear. This wasn't just a chamber. It was a temple, a palace, something grand and ancient that had been swallowed by the desert centuries ago. The walls were covered in inscriptions in a language I didn't recognize. Images of people, of ceremonies, of something that looked like stars or maps of the heavens, and in the center of the largest wall, carved 10 feet tall, was a symbol that made my blood run cold. An eye, wide open, watching. "Where are we?" Chen whispered. Nobody had an answer, but as I stared at that carved eye, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was staring back at us, and that we had just stumbled into something that was never supposed to be found. We sat on that stone platform for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, catching our breath and trying to process what had just happened. The water dripped from our uniforms, forming small puddles on stone that hadn't been touched by moisture in who knows how long. Above us, the opening we'd fallen through seemed impossibly far away. "We need to assess the situation," Davidson finally said, trying to regain some semblance of command. "Rodriguez, check everyone for injuries. Chen, see what equipment we salvaged. Jackson, Pettis, check the Humvee, see if the radio still works." We moved mechanically, following orders because it was easier than confronting the reality of our situation. Rodriguez found mostly bruises and a sprained wrist on Pettis, nothing serious. Chen had managed to save one flashlight, a camera, and some basic supplies. The Humvee's radio was completely dead, crushed in the fall. "We're not getting out the way we came in," Santos said, staring up at the opening. "Even if we could climb those walls, they're smooth as glass. We'd need rope, gear we don't have." "Then we find another way out," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "This place was built by people. People need exits. There has to be another way to the surface." Davidson nodded slowly. "Reed's right. We explore, we document, and we find a way out. Stay together, stay alert. Whatever this place is, it's been here a long time. A few more hours won't hurt." He was wrong about that, but none of us knew it yet. Chen turned on the flashlight, and its beam cut through the darkness of the passages beyond the main chamber. We moved as a unit, weapons drawn, even though I wasn't sure what we'd be shooting at down here. Ghosts? History? The passages were wide enough for 3 men to walk side by side, and the ceilings were high, at least 12 feet. Every surface was covered in carvings, not random decorations, but deliberate inscriptions, like pages of a book written in stone. "This is incredible," Chen breathed, running his fingers along the walls.
These symbols, I've seen something similar in my comparative religion class. This looks like proto-cuneiform, but older, much older.
English, Chen, Jackson grunted.
It's ancient Mesopotamian, or what came before it. This could be from the Sumerian period, maybe even older. We're talking 3000 BC, possibly older.
Santos let out a low whistle. So we fell into a 5,000-year-old building? Great, just great.
The passage sloped downward, taking us deeper into the earth. The air grew cooler, which should have been refreshing after the desert heat, but instead it just felt wrong, stale, heavy, like breathing in time itself. We passed chambers filled with pottery, perfectly preserved despite the millennia. Rooms with stone benches arranged in circles as if for meetings or ceremonies. One room had walls covered entirely in astronomical charts, constellations I recognized and some I didn't. They were advanced, really advanced. Look at this. They understood the movement of planets, the stars. This isn't primitive.
Why isn't this in any history book? Pettis asked. Something this big, this old? Archaeologists would kill to find this.
Maybe someone didn't want it found, Davidson said quietly. We continued deeper. The passages branched off in multiple directions, like a labyrinth designed to confuse intruders. Chen marked our path with chalk from the medical kit, making sure we could find our way back. That's when we started hearing it. At first, I thought it was just the sound of water dripping, echoing through the stone. But then I realized it was rhythmic, almost musical, like a heartbeat, slow and steady, coming from somewhere ahead. "You guys hear that?" Santos asked, his voice tight. We all did. Nobody wanted to admit it, but we all heard it. "Could be underground water," Rodriguez suggested. "A river or stream, the sound reverberating through the chambers." But it didn't sound like water. It sounded deliberate, purposeful. Against my better judgment, against every instinct screaming at me to turn back, we followed the sound. The passage opened into another chamber, and this one made all the others look insignificant. It was massive, a cathedral carved from solid rock, with columns that soared into darkness beyond our flashlight's reach. In the center stood a platform, and on that platform was a structure that defied explanation. It looked like an altar, but it was made of a material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Black, smooth, and covered in symbols that actually glowed with a faint blue luminescence. The heartbeat sound was coming from it, pulsing through the chamber like the room itself was alive. "Nobody touch anything," Davidson ordered, but his voice was barely a whisper. Chen was already circling the platform, documenting everything with his camera. "Sir, these symbols, they're not just decorative, they're mathematical. Equations, formulas. This is some kind of calculation, or maybe a map." "A map to what?" I asked. Chen looked up at me, and in the glow of his flashlight, his face was pale. "I don't know, Sarge, but whatever it is, these people thought it was important enough to bury under hundreds of feet of sand and stone." That's when we saw the bodies. Not skeletons, bodies. Preserved somehow, arranged in a circle around the altar, kneeling as if in prayer. There were 12 of them, wearing robes made of a fabric that hadn't decayed. Their faces peaceful, but their eyes were open. And they were wrong. Too large, too dark, almost black. "What happened to them?" Santos whispered. Rodriguez, our medic, moved closer to examine one of the figures. He reached out, touched the shoulder of the nearest figure, and it crumbled to dust instantly, just collapsed into nothing, as if our presence had broken whatever preservation had kept it intact for thousands of years. "Don't touch them," Rodriguez yelled, jumping back. But it was too late. One by one, like dominoes, the other figures began to crumble. Dust filled the air, and with it came a smell. Ancient, chemical, wrong. And the heartbeat sound stopped. The silence was worse than the sound had been. In that sudden quiet, we could hear our own breathing, our own hearts racing. The blue glow from the altar began to pulse faster, brighter. "We need to leave," I said. "Right now. Everyone out. Back to the main chamber." "Reed's right. Move, double time." We ran.
We didn't make it far before the entire structure began to shake. Not like the tremor that had brought us down here. This was different, deeper, like the earth itself was waking up after a long sleep. Dust and small stones rained down from the ceiling as we sprinted through the passages, following Chen's chalk marks back toward the main chamber. "Keep moving!" I shouted, bringing up the rear to make sure nobody fell behind. The blue light from the altar chamber was growing brighter, spilling into the corridors behind us. It cast our shadows long and distorted against the ancient walls, making it look like we were being chased by giants. We burst back into the main chamber where we'd first fallen in, gasping for air. The pool of water was churning now, forming small whirlpools that hadn't been there before. The eye carved into the wall seemed to glow with that same blue light, pulsing in rhythm with whatever we'd awakened. "What did we do?" Chen panted, hands on his knees. "What did we just activate?" "We didn't activate anything," Davidson snapped. We disturbed something that was meant to stay buried," Rodriguez interrupted. "Those people, those bodies, they were guards, or prisoners, or sacrifices." Santos finished quietly. The word hung in the air like a curse. Sacrifices. To what? For what purpose? That's when we heard it. Voices. Not the heartbeat sound, but actual voices. Speaking in a language that sounded like water flowing over rocks, like wind through empty halls. They came from deeper in the complex, from passages we hadn't explored. "We're not alone down here," Jackson said, raising his weapon. "Could be survivors from the collapse," Pettis suggested. "Other soldiers?" But I knew better. We all knew better. Those voices weren't speaking English or Arabic or any modern language. They were speaking something ancient, something that predated the written word. Davidson made a decision. "We need to find another exit, now. Split into 2 teams. Reed, you take Santos, Rodriguez, and Chen. Head east through that passage. My team will go west. First one to find a way out signals the other. Understood?" "Sir, splitting up is a terrible idea. We should stay together." "That's an order, Sergeant." There was something in his eyes. Fear, yes, but also determination, or maybe desperation. He knew something we didn't. I was sure of it now. The vague briefing, the remote location, the way he hadn't seemed surprised by any of this. Before I could argue further, figures emerged from the Western Passage, but they weren't speaking ancient languages or glowing blue. They were wearing desert camouflage and carrying equipment that was definitely not standard army issue. "Stand down," a voice commanded. A man stepped forward, older, maybe 50, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much. He wore no rank insignia, no name tag, nothing to identify who he was or who he worked for. Behind him were 6 others, all armed, all watching us with expressions that made my skin crawl. "Who are you people?" Davidson demanded, but his voice cracked slightly. "Lieutenant Davidson, we've been monitoring your patrol. We knew you'd find this place eventually. The ground collapse was unfortunate, but perhaps fortuitous." "Monitoring?" I stepped forward. "Who the hell are you people?" The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You can call me Dr. Ashford.
I'm with a department that doesn't officially exist, handling discoveries that officially didn't happen. And gentlemen, you've just stumbled into something that officially can never be acknowledged." "You knew this was here," Chen said accusingly. "You knew, and you sent us anyway." "We've known about this site for 40 years, since the 1950s when oil surveys detected the anomaly. But we couldn't excavate without drawing attention. Wars, however, provide excellent cover for clandestine archaeological operations." The pieces were falling into place, and I didn't like the picture they formed. "The whole war? You're saying this is why?" "Don't be dramatic, Sergeant. The war had many causes. But yes, certain parties were interested in gaining access to sites like this, sites that predate recorded civilization, sites that contain knowledge that could change everything we think we know about human history." "What is this place?" Rodriguez asked. Ashford walked toward the altar, gesturing for us to follow. His team surrounded us, not threatening, but making it clear we didn't have a choice. We followed him back through the passages we'd just fled, back to the chamber with the glowing altar. The blue light had stabilized now, pulsing gently. The dust from the crumbled bodies had settled, leaving only stains on the floor where they'd knelt for millennia. "This," he said, spreading his arms wide, "is what some call a library. Others call it a temple. We call it a beacon." "A beacon for what?" Santos asked. "For them." He pointed to the ceiling. We looked up. The darkness above the chamber wasn't darkness at all. It was covered in stars. Not carved stars, but actual points of light, like looking at the night sky. Except these constellations were wrong, arranged in patterns I'd never seen. "This isn't Earth's sky," Chen whispered. "No," Ashford confirmed. "It's older, much older. Before the poles shifted, before the continents moved, before the flood that every ancient culture remembers. This place was built by people, if they were people, who came from somewhere else. Or perhaps by people who became something else." "That's insane," Davidson said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" Ashford walked to the altar, placing his hand on its surface without fear. "Every ancient culture has stories of gods who came from the sky, teachers who brought knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, mathematics, and writing. What if they weren't myths? What if they were memories?" "And this altar?" I asked, though I didn't want to know the answer. "This is a communication device," he said simply. "When activated properly, it sends a signal. Out there," he pointed up again. "And gentlemen, when you disturbed those guardians, when they crumbled to dust, you completed a circuit that's been broken for over 4,000 years." The implications crashed over me like a wave. "You're saying we just sent a signal to what? Aliens? To whoever built this place, to whoever taught our ancestors to build pyramids and write in cuneiform and chart the stars. We've been waiting decades for this moment, trying to activate this beacon ourselves, and you seven stumbled in and did it by accident. So what now? We just wait for little green men to show up?" Ashford's expression turned grave. "The signal was sent 30 minutes ago. At the speed these things travel, whoever receives it could be here in days, or hours, or they might already be here, waiting for the invitation." The chamber shook again, but this time it wasn't coming from inside the complex. It was coming from above, from the surface, from the sky. Something was answering.
The sound from above was like thunder, but constant, a deep, resonating hum that made my teeth ache and my bones vibrate. Ashford's team immediately went into action, pulling out equipment I'd never seen before. Scanners, tablets with readings that meant nothing to me,
communication devices that crackled with encrypted chatter. "Is it them?" one of Ashford's men asked urgently. "Too soon to tell," Ashford replied, studying a handheld device. "Could be atmospheric response to the beacon, or it could be a probe. Either way, we need to document everything." "What about us?" I demanded. "You can't just keep us down here while—" "Actually, Sergeant Reed, that's exactly what I can do." Ashford's tone shifted, becoming colder, more authoritative. "You and your men have just become the most classified operation in human history. From this moment forward, everything you've seen, everything you've experienced, it never happened." Davidson stepped forward. "Sir, my men deserve to know what they're dealing with. If there's really something coming, your men deserve to go home alive, and that only happens if they cooperate fully. Lieutenant, you were briefed on the possibilities before this mission. You knew there were risks." The betrayal on Davidson's face told me everything. He had known, maybe not the full extent, but he'd known this patrol was different, that we were being used as unwitting test subjects. "You son of a—" Santos lunged forward, but Jackson caught him, held him back. "Easy," I said quietly, putting a hand on Santos's shoulder. "Getting angry won't help us now." But inside, I was furious. We'd been played, sent into the desert like pawns on a chessboard, expendable pieces in a game we didn't even know we were playing. The humming from above intensified, and suddenly the blue light from the altar flared so bright we had to shield our eyes. The symbols carved on its surface began to move, actually move, rearranging themselves like puzzle pieces, forming new patterns and equations. Chen, despite everything, couldn't help his curiosity. "It's responding to something," he said, moving closer. "The signal we sent is receiving a reply. It's like a handshake between computers, a confirmation protocol." "What's it saying?" "I don't know, but it's definitely communicating with something." Ashford was speaking rapidly into his radio now, calling for additional teams, requesting immediate extraction protocols. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than even he had anticipated. "We need to move everyone to the surface. If there's going to be a direct response, we can't have personnel this close to the beacon." "Agreed," Ashford nodded. "There's a service entrance we excavated 3 months ago, northeast tunnel. It'll take us up through a hidden shaft. Quickly now." We were herded, there's no other word for it, through passages that Ashford's team knew by heart. They'd been down here before, many times, studying this place while the war raged above. The northeast tunnel was marked with modern equipment, LED lights strung along the walls, support beams reinforcing ancient stone, supply caches every 50 feet. "How long have you been down here?" Chen asked, his scientific mind still working despite the chaos. "Long enough to know we're dealing with something beyond our understanding. We found 12 of these sites worldwide. Different cultures, different eras, but all with the same basic structure. Altars, astronomical charts, and symbols that suggest a unified origin point. Someone seeded knowledge across this planet thousands of years ago." "Why?" I asked. "Why would anyone do that?" "That's what we've been trying to determine. Some think it was benevolence, advanced beings trying to help primitive humanity. Others think it was preparation, getting us ready for something." "Ready for what?" Ashford glanced back at me. "Maybe we're about to find out." The tunnel ended at a vertical shaft with a mechanical lift, definitely modern construction. As we crowded onto the platform, the humming from below changed pitch, becoming almost musical. It reminded me of the sound we'd heard earlier, that heartbeat rhythm, but more complex now, more urgent. We rose through the shaft, passing layers of sand and stone and history. When we finally emerged onto the surface, the sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. But the sky above looked wrong, shimmering like heat waves, but in patterns that formed and dissolved too quickly to focus on. A temporary base had been set up around the site, tents, Vehicles, satellite equipment, and at least 50 personnel, all wearing the same unmarked uniforms as Ashford's team. This wasn't a spontaneous operation. This was planned, organized, funded by people with resources that went beyond standard military budgets. "Separate them," Ashford ordered. "Individual debriefing. Start with the lieutenant." "Wait," I tried to protest, but armed guards were already moving between us, pulling us apart. "Marcus," Santos called out as they led him toward one of the tents, "don't tell them anything." But what choice did we have? We were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by people who didn't officially exist, dealing with a situation that officially didn't happen. We had no leverage, no authority, no protection. They took me to a tent with a folding table and 2 chairs. A woman sat across from me, younger than Ashford, maybe 35, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Sergeant Reed, my name is Agent Monroe. I need you to tell me everything that happened from the moment your patrol encountered the pillars. I want to speak to my commanding officer, real commanding officer, not Lieutenant Davidson." "That's not possible right now. Please, just answer the questions." We went through it all. Every detail, every observation. She took notes, recorded everything, asked me to repeat certain parts. The whole time, I could hear the humming through the tent walls, could see the strange shimmer in the sky through the fabric. After 2 hours, she finally leaned back. "Sergeant, I know what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to accept, but it's for your safety. You and your unit are going to sign non-disclosure agreements. You will never speak of this day to anyone. Not your family, not your friends, not other soldiers. As far as official records are concerned, your patrol encountered enemy fire. Your vehicle was destroyed, and you were extracted after being pinned down for several hours. That's the story. That's the only story. And if we refuse?" Her expression softened slightly. "Then you'll spend the rest of your lives in a facility where you can't talk to anyone. Is that what you want? Because we will do it. We have done it before." "You can't just—" "We can. We have. And we will." She slid a document across the table. "Sign this, go home, live your life, tell no one. Or don't sign and disappear. Those are your options." I looked at the NDA, at the legal language that essentially erased my rights, my voice, my truth. My hand shook as I picked up the pen. "What about what's coming? What about the response to that beacon?" "That's no longer your concern, Sergeant. Your war is over. Ours is just beginning." I signed. What else could I do?
They separated us for 3 days. 3 days in different tents, different debriefings, different psychological evaluations. They wanted to make sure our stories matched, that we understood the consequences of speaking out, that we were mentally stable enough to keep the secret without breaking down. On the 3rd day, they brought us back together. We looked like ghosts of ourselves, eyes hollow, faces drawn. Santos had lost weight. Rodriguez wouldn't stop shaking. Jen stared at nothing, his scientific curiosity replaced by something that looked like despair. "You're being reassigned," Ashford told us in a final briefing. "Different units, different bases, different continents. You'll have no contact with each other for a minimum of 5 years. Your service records will reflect exemplary performance, and you'll all receive commendations for your actions during the war." "Commendations for what?" Jackson asked bitterly. "For finding something you wanted us to find? For being guinea pigs? For serving your country in ways you can never be publicly acknowledged for," Ashford replied, without emotion. "Consider yourselves lucky. Most people who discover what you discovered don't leave the desert alive." They flew us out that night, separately. I didn't get to say goodbye to Santos, to any of them. One moment we were together, the next I was on a transport heading to Germany, then stateside, then processed out of the Army 6 months later with an honorable discharge and a medal I didn't earn.
I tried to move on. Got a job as a construction foreman in Ohio. Met a woman named Sarah, got married, had 2 kids, built a normal life, a good life. But every night, I dreamed of that chamber, of the blue light, of the symbols that moved and breathed, of the sound from the sky that we'd awakened. For years, I kept my promise, never spoke of it, never even researched it online, terrified that someone was watching, monitoring, waiting for me to break my silence. But I thought about my unit, wondered where they were, if they were okay, if they ever dreamed the same dreams. Then, 15 years after that day in the desert, I got a phone call. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Marcus!" The voice was older, rougher, but unmistakable. "Jimmy?" My heart raced. "Santos, after 15 years of silence." "I need you to listen carefully. Don't say anything, just listen. Chen is dead. Suicide, they said. Found him in his apartment last month. Rodriguez died 3 years ago. Car accident. Jackson had a heart attack at 42. 42, Marcus. Pettis got cancer that came out of nowhere and killed him in 6 months." My blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we're being eliminated, one by one. It's too many coincidences, too many convenient deaths. Davidson disappeared 2 years ago, just vanished. I'm the only other one left besides you, and I think they know I've been looking into it." "Jimmy, if they're listening, let them listen." His voice cracked. "I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of carrying this alone. Something happened after we left that desert, Marcus. Something they don't want getting out, and they're cleaning up loose ends." The line went dead. I tried calling back. Nothing. I tried finding him through every channel I could think of. 3 weeks later, I saw a news report. James Santos, former Army corporal, killed in a home invasion in San Diego. Suspects unknown. 7 men went into that desert. Now I'm the only one left. That's when I started really digging, carefully, using encrypted networks and anonymous browsers. I found others, people who claimed to have encountered similar sights, similar phenomena. Most were dismissed as conspiracy theorists, but their stories had details that matched mine too perfectly to be coincidence. I found archaeological reports that had been scrubbed from databases, satellite imagery that had been doctored, records of excavations that officially never happened. And I found patterns. Every major conflict in the Middle East over the past 70 years had, at some point, involved areas where these ancient sites were located. We weren't sent to that desert by accident. We were sent there because they needed the beacon activated, and they couldn't do it themselves. They needed people who didn't know what they were doing, who would stumble through with innocent intentions and break the seals that had kept that place dormant for millennia. We were the key, and once we'd served our purpose, we became liabilities. Last month, I was diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia. The doctors are baffled. I have no family history, no environmental exposure, nothing that explains it. They give me 6 months, maybe a year. But I know what this is. They've moved on from accidents and home invasions. This is cleaner, untraceable. I'm 57 years old, and I'm dying. And before I go, I need people to know the truth. Not just about what we found in that desert, but about what it means. Because here's what they don't want you to know. That beacon, it wasn't the only one. Ashford said they'd found 12 sites worldwide, 12 beacons, all connected, all part of a network. And when we activated that one in Iraq, we didn't just send a signal out into space. We sent a signal that activated all of them. I've tracked reports from around the world. Strange phenomena near ancient sites. Unusual lights above Machu Picchu. Unusual electromagnetic readings at the pyramids of Giza. Seismic activity with no tectonic explanation beneath sites in Cambodia, Turkey, Mexico. They're all waking up, all responding to the call we sent 34 years ago. And something is coming. Maybe it's already here. I've spent 30 years being silent, being afraid, watching my friends die one by one. But silence hasn't protected me. It hasn't protected any of us. They'll find this video eventually. They'll scrub it from the internet. They'll discredit me as a dying man with delusions. But maybe, just maybe, enough people will see it first. Enough people will ask questions, demand answers, refuse to let this be buried again. My name is Marcus Reed. I was a soldier in the Gulf War, and in February of 1991, my unit discovered something that changed everything I thought I knew about human history, about who we are, and about who came before us. This is my testimony. This is my truth. And this is my warning.
I'm recording this in a motel room outside of Roswell, New Mexico. The irony isn't lost on me. Coming to a place famous for supposed alien encounters to tell my story about actual contact with something beyond our understanding. But I chose this location for a reason. There are people here, researchers, believers, people who've been dismissed and ridiculed for decades who might actually listen. The doctors gave me 6 months. That was 4 months ago. I can feel my body failing, shutting down piece by piece, but my mind is still clear, and there's still more I need to say. Things I didn't tell the debriefing agents, things I didn't even tell Santos when we spoke that last time. Because I went back. 2 years ago, before I got sick, I went back to Iraq. It wasn't easy. The region is still unstable, still dangerous, but I had to know. I had to see if that place still existed, or if they'd destroyed it, buried it again under tons of sand and concrete and official denial. I hired a guide, a local man named Kareem, who knew the desert like his own heartbeat. I didn't tell him what I was looking for, just gave him coordinates and paid him well enough not to ask questions. It took us 3 days of driving through territory that wasn't on any map, past checkpoints that officially didn't exist. And I found it. The pillars were still there, weathered by another 24 years of wind and sand, but standing. The entrance we'd fallen through had been sealed, filled in with concrete and covered with camouflage netting to hide it from satellite surveillance. But there were tire tracks, recent ones. People had been there. People were still going there. I couldn't get inside. The seals were too strong, and I'm an old man with cancer, not the young soldier I used to be. But I could feel it. That same presence, that same awareness we'd sensed in the chamber. It was still active, still waiting, still communicating with something far away. Kareem felt it too. He wouldn't get closer than 100 feet from the pillars. "This place is cursed," he told me in broken English. "My grandfather's grandfather spoke of it, said the old ones sleep here, said we must never wake them."
"What old ones?" I asked. He looked at me with ancient eyes. "The first teachers, the skywalkers, the ones who made us human." Indigenous peoples around these sites all have similar stories. Every culture has a version: the Anunnaki in Sumerian texts, the Nephilim in biblical accounts, the Sky People in Native American traditions, the Viracocha in Incan mythology. We dismiss them as primitive superstition, as mythology created to explain what ancient people couldn't understand. But what if they weren't myths? What if they were history? I've spent 2 years researching, compiling evidence, connecting dots that governments and corporations and shadow agencies have spent billions trying to keep separated. And here's what I believe happened. Thousands of years ago, something came to Earth, not to conquer, but to teach, to guide, to accelerate human development from scattered tribes into civilizations capable of mathematics, astronomy, agriculture, architecture. They built these beacon sites as communication hubs, as teaching centers, as monuments to their presence. But something went wrong. Maybe they had to leave suddenly. Maybe there was a conflict with another faction. Maybe humanity itself rebelled, frightened by beings we couldn't fully understand. The biblical flood, the fall of Atlantis, the collapse of dozens of ancient civilizations, all around the same period. Maybe they're all describing the same event from different perspectives. These beings left, but they left the beacons behind, sealed them, left guardians or prisoners to watch over them. And they left instructions, encoded in every major religion, every ancient text. Do not wake what sleeps. Do not call us back until you're ready. But we weren't ready in 1991. We're still not ready now. And yet we called anyway. I tracked down one of Ashford's former team members. Took me 18 months to find him, living under an assumed name in Norway. He was dying too. Liver failure, too young, too sudden. We recognized each other as fellow dead men walking. They detected the response 6 days after you left, he told me over whiskey in his small apartment overlooking a fjord. Something massive, moving through space at speeds that shouldn't be possible. It changed course when the beacon activated, changed course toward Earth. When will it arrive? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. It already has. He poured another drink with shaking hands. It arrived in 2003. Didn't land, just took up position in high orbit, hidden by stealth technology that makes it invisible to everything we have. It's been watching us, studying us, deciding if we're worth direct contact, or if we're still too primitive, too violent, too dangerous to ourselves. What happens if they decide we're not ready? He looked at me with eyes that had seen classified briefings I couldn't imagine. Then they leave again, seal the beacons, and we get another few thousand years to grow up, if we survive that long. And if they decide differently, then everything changes. Every government, every religion, every certainty we have about our place in the universe, all of it gets rewritten overnight. He died 3 weeks after our conversation. I was only 2 people at his funeral. So here's what I want everyone watching this to understand. I'm not telling you this story to frighten you. I'm not trying to start a panic or push some agenda. I'm telling you because you deserve to know that we're not alone, that we've never been alone, and that the governments of the world have known this for decades while keeping the rest of humanity in the dark. We found proof that human civilization was seeded by something beyond Earth, that our development was guided, accelerated, given a purpose we've since forgotten. And when we activated that beacon in 1991, we sent out a call that said, "We're here."
We remember. We're ready. But I don't think we are ready. I don't think we've learned the lessons we were supposed to learn. We're still fighting wars over resources and ideologies, still destroying our planet for short-term profit, still treating each other with cruelty and indifference. Maybe that's why they're waiting. Maybe they're giving us a chance to prove we've evolved beyond what we were, to show we're worthy of whatever knowledge they possess, whatever place in a larger cosmic community they might offer. Or maybe they're just deciding the kindest way to let us destroy ourselves. I don't know what happens when I post this video. Maybe it gets 1 million views and changes nothing. Maybe it gets scrubbed from every platform within hours. Maybe I get a midnight visit from people who want to make sure I never upload anything again. But I'm dying anyway. They can't take more from me than they already have. They took my friends, my brothers in arms. They took 34 years of truth and turned them into 34 years of lies and fear. They took that moment in the desert, that moment of wonder and discovery, and made it classified, buried, erased. I want my grandchildren to live in a world that knows the truth, a world that understands we're part of something bigger, older, more profound than our little tribal conflicts and petty divisions. To Jimmy Santos, wherever you are now, I kept our promise as long as I could, brother. I hope I did right by you and the others. I hope this matters. To anyone watching this, I have one request. Don't let them bury this again. Share it, archive it, spread it far and wide before they can contain it. And when the time comes, when the next beacon activates, when the next discovery is made, when whatever is waiting in orbit finally makes its presence known, don't be afraid. We were meant to reach for the stars. We were meant to ask questions, to seek truth, to join something greater than ourselves. That's what those ancient teachers wanted for us. That's why they came, why they built those beacons, why they left us with the capacity to one day understand. My name is Marcus Reed. I was a soldier who found something impossible. And this is my truth, given freely, before I run out of time to give it. The beacon is still active. The signal is still transmitting. Something is still watching and waiting. And when it decides we're ready, or decides we're not, the world as we know it will change forever. Until then, look up at the stars. Remember that we're not alone, and prepare for whatever comes next. This is my final testimony. This is goodbye. Epilogue. The video was uploaded on March 15, 2025. It received 47,000 views in the first hour before being removed from YouTube, citing violation of community guidelines. Copies appeared on alternate platforms. Some survived. Most didn't. Marcus Reed's death was reported 3 days later. Official cause: complications from leukemia. His funeral was attended by his family and 3 strangers who didn't give their names. The motel room where he recorded his final message was sanitized by unknown individuals within hours of his death. No equipment, no notes, no evidence of his presence remained. But the truth, once spoken, can never be completely silenced. Somewhere, the beacons are still transmitting, and somewhere, something is still listening.